Jade Empire is a 2005 RPG developed by BioWare. It's one of the weirder entries in their catalog in the sense that, although it received some pretty decent reviews, it never got a proper follow-up. Now, I'm not gonna start speculating as to why that happened, but I'm assuming the fact that it sold below expectations had something to do with it. I have to say that the history behind Jade Empire's development is interesting to explore. So Jade Empire, which started development in 2001, was actually BioWare's first original RPG intellectual property. Wow, what a mouthful. The basic concept of the game had existed with the company's founders since they started BioWare back in the 90s. But as you can probably imagine, getting an original IP off the ground, especially for a fledgling studio, was probably as hard then as it is today. So I'm assuming they thought that earning their chops by developing games based on pre-existing intellectual properties first and then moving on to an original IP was the best approach. As it turned out, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Neverwinter Nights and the Baldur's Gate series were smash hits, so I guess they made the smart move. What's interesting is that Jade Empire was actually a passion project of the two co-founders. Their aim was to create an RPG that would fulfill player fantasies of becoming a martial arts master. They also wanted to create an original world and storyline without the creative restrictions that a well-established IP usually entails. So BioWare basically poured everything they had to make Jade Empire as best as possible. The writers based the plot on Chinese classic novels and samurai movies. Instead of hand animation, they used motion capture to add a level of realism to the combat. They hired a linguist from the University of Alberta to create a new language for the game called Fan. They even recruited Jack Wall of Myst and Splinter Cell fame to write the soundtrack. I can't help but feel a little bit fuzzy on the inside when reading about Jade Empire's development. It's rare for a passion project to benefit from such high production values. So yeah, with that being said, let's move on to the actual game.
I object!
So the very first thing you'll do in Jade Empire is creating your character. There's not much in the way of character creation here. The game offers 7 pre-made characters which you can take as they are or alter their stats. There are 3 stats: body, spirit and mind, which directly influence your health, chi, which is this game's version of mana, and focus, which I guess stands for stamina here. I decided to just go with a pre-made character. My thinking here was that stats would not matter that much since the game was marketed as a story-driven RPG, and I was partially right. Oh, you can also name your character. If you can't whip up a lore-friendly name by yourself, you can choose one of the pre-made ones. Again, I went with a pre-made one, though in retrospect I kinda regret not choosing a Wu-Tang Clan inspired name. What are you gonna do? After that, you're dropped right into exposition in Tutorial Town. Population: how the fuck were they able to keep this village fully functional with only a handful of people? You assume the role of a senior student at the Two Rivers Martial Arts School. After a short tutorial section that has you spar with one of your classmates, I guess, you're free to explore the village. The starting area functions as a sort of microcosm of the whole game. Student Win, a veritable exposition dumping machine, gives you a crash course into the intricate politics of the Empire, as well as some tidbits of information about the ghosts plaguing the countryside. Student Lin reveals that apparently you're super duper special and Master Lin has made it his life's work to ensure that you reach your full potential, focusing on your training to the detriment of other students, which obviously attracted equal amounts of envy and admiration from them. This dude, who sports the most ridiculous looking eyebrows in the history of the video game industry, explains some basic philosophical concepts and hints at a few of the themes the story explores. Basically, the world is governed by 2 major schools of thought called Open Palm and Closed Fist. From what I gathered from Eyebrow Man here, neither are supposed to be based around good and evil, rather the person's intent. For example, an adherent of the Open Palm philosophy would offer to help me propel this channel to YouTube stardom out of altruism, simply because it's the right thing to do. They'd spend weeks of their free time helping me refine my writing, teaching me how to edit, optimize my descriptions and tags for SEO, stuff like that. Closed Fist believes in self-reliance. They believe that by helping me, they'd actually deny me the opportunity to learn from my struggles and grow as a person. It's also the more violent path, so instead of taking the pacifist route that involves bettering myself as a content creator, closed-fist adherents would rather suggest busting the algorithm's kneecaps with a baseball bat, but let's not delve too deep into abstract territory here. Of course, this whole conversation with Eyebrow Man is just a veiled attempt at introducing the game's morality system, which was ripped straight out of Knights of the Old Republic. I'll circle back to it later in the video. Anyway, back to the premise. So while talking with Master Lin about you being special and destined for great things, the village is attacked by bandits. You rush to the beach, fight a few people and ghosts, after which Master Lin pops out of nowhere and kills the leader. He then reveals that these were no mere bandits and that the attack was led by a member of the Lotus Assassins. The Lotus Assassins are a branch of the government, a sort of secret police created by the Emperor's son Hai to enforce his will. It's led by the so-called Death's Hand, who is also the Emperor's younger brother. Shortly after, the village is attacked again, this time by a full contingent of Lotus Assassins. You probably already know where this is going. They raise the village, they kill everybody, and then kidnap Master Lin, for reasons I'm not gonna reveal to keep this video spoiler free. You then go on an epic adventure to save your master and fulfill your destiny, or some nerd shit like that. Woo, this game dumps a lot of stuff on you from the very beginning. Ghosts, politics, philosophy, mythology, tons of universe-specific terminologies. You learn about the Empire's intricate bureaucracy and criminal elements. I felt overwhelmed by the ludicrous amount of information thrown at me. So much so that it took me about 7 hours of in-game time to realize that Death's Hand was the leader of the Lotus Assassins and not a separate organization. Also, the starting area is a slog. Don't get me wrong, it's brimming with atmosphere and charm, which actually takes me to one of the game's strongest feats, which is the presentation.
Your jibes, canary, prick the armor of my pride. They are blunted barbs forged by the sputtering flames of your lesser intellect.
From a technical perspective, Jade Empire doesn't look like a game that came out nearly 2 decades ago. With the exception of the menus, which are monstrous to look at, and the cutscenes, I don't really have anything to complain about. What stood out to me is the art direction. The environments were modeled on artwork from the Song Dynasty, while the color palette is reminiscent of Tang Dynasty art. For the more fantastical elements of the setting, they drew both from Chinese mythology as well as some original concepts. What's more, while the Chinese influences are the most prevalent, the art team also drew inspiration for clothing and scenery from other Asian cultures such as Japan, Thailand and Tibet. The result is that the world of Jade Empire feels both familiar and alien at the same time. It's fantastical but weirdly grounded in a way. Before I forget, I have to mention the excellent light effects. I love how they add a tinge of whimsical flavor even to the more grounded locations. Also, the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. This is not really my area of expertise in terms of music, so I'm gonna let you listen to a few snippets. The presentation is not without its flaws. My first complaint is related to one of the game's most unique features, that being the fictional language. Now, I know that for immersion purposes, a fictional language can do wonders in terms of making a fictional world seem real. But for me, it had the exact opposite effect. For one, there's a clear disconnect between what its speakers are physically saying and the number of words displayed in the subtitles. Like, the subtitles could display a fucking 100-page essay on why the Postal Service is the best indie band to grace this planet, only for the characters to finish reciting it in a few seconds. Look, I get it. Inventing an entire new language must be extremely difficult. Also, it's a 2,500 word language, so complaining about its lack of complexity is silly to say the least. But it did ruin a few scenes for me, especially since the voice actors who had the unenviable and arguably difficult task to perform in a fictional language don't seem to put any emotion into their performances. Let me give you an example. Before entering Tien's Landing, you meet two villagers, mother and daughter, who tell you that they're leaving the village to start fresh somewhere else. Sometime later, you find a mother in a pirate camp, where she begs you to save her daughter, who was about to be sold into slavery. Well, beg is an overstatement, because the tone in which she says it is in no way indicative of the dire situation they found themselves in. And then when you save her daughter, same thing. Absolutely no emotion in her voice. Look, I respect BioWare for what they did here, but it just didn't click with me. It was not a big deal, just something that I had to get out of my system. There are some other minor issues. The cutscenes are low res, but I understand it's because Jade Empire was an Xbox exclusive game. On a few occasions my character turned into a floor and I had to reload a previous save. Also worth mentioning are the disjointed dialogue transitions. Like a character would first react to a previous event and then awkwardly transition to their regular dialogue loop.
I hear bandits have injured Kia Min. She is a favorite pupil and holds the record for the challenge I run. I'm sure Master Lee will take care of her. What can I do for you?
But other than that, Jade Empire holds up quite well. I love the art design, the beautiful vistas, the soundtrack, the English voice acting, did I fucking write this? Is excellent. It definitely looks and sounds high budget, at least for its time.
As you say, I will be here scrubbing your pots until you call upon me again.
What bots? Being a story-driven RPG, Jade Empire has two layers to its gameplay, talking and fighting. Let's start with the first, because this is arguably Jade Empire's biggest strength. Okay, where do I even fucking start, man? So, for conversations, BioWare pretty much borrowed the dialogue system from Knights of the Old Republic. You approach an NPC and the game will dump a truckload of dialogue options for you to pick. Don't expect anything fancy here, it's just functional. Though it does bug me how most NPCs, even the ones that actively despise you, are more than happy to offer you tons of information. Another element that BioWare borrowed from KOTOR is the morality system. Now here's the thing, the way the game presents these two alignments is very different from how they actually work, mechanically speaking. So while Mr. Eyebrow here coats them with all these nuances and shades of grey, in practice it's your basic binary good and evil system, which the game is more than happy to differentiate by having your character make these goofy fucking faces. The disconnect between how these two alignments are presented in the lore and how they are implemented into the gameplay becomes quite jarring in certain moments. For example, one of the main quests in Tien's Landing sends you to the old Tien's Landing, which had been flooded some 20 years before the events of the game, and is now haunted by ghosts and other spoopy shit. There you stumble into these two kid ghosts in an abandoned orphanage. The boy ghost explains in vivid detail how all the kids clawed at the doors and windows, desperate to escape as their lungs were slowly filling up with water. Yeah, some depressing shit. So what's the closed fist dialogue response here? If you were strong, you could have survived. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, what is wrong with you? Like, Eyebrow Man said nothing about closed fist requiring its adherents to be freaking sociopaths. There are many other examples such as this one, but I'm not gonna drone on too much about the flaws of this system. One thing that I have to mention is that it's clear that open palm is the optimal way to play the game. Choosing closed fist dialogue options will outright lock you out of large chunks of content, which is not bad in itself. I'm fine with games locking me out of quest chains due to my decisions, as long as it offers me an equally good alternative. Fallout New Vegas is a good example in this sense. Not here though, so if you want to experience as much of the lore and side stuff as possible, go with Open Palm. Speaking of side content, I gotta say I didn't expect them to be as good as they were. Okay, I actually did because it's BioWare, but let's just say Jade Empire suffers from some pacing issues. It takes a while to get to the good stuff. Be warned that I will spoil 2 minor quest outcomes, so go to the time displayed on the screen if you don't want to get spoiled. Thank god they're gone. Okay, side content. So I'm happy to report that the majority of side quests are great. What makes them stand out in my opinion is that most of them come with an interesting twist. I'm obviously not gonna go through all of them, so let me give you a few examples. So this merchant from Tien's Landing has you recover a precious family heirloom that was stolen by a drunken sailor. Confronting the sailor reveals that he stole the heirloom simply because his mother, who he hadn't seen in a long time, had a similar statue in her house. And then he started sobbing and returned the statue after I asked him what his mother would think if she found out her son was stealing. It was a pretty sweet quest and I honestly didn't see the twist coming. Early in the game I saved a merchant from a group of marauding bandits. The merchant then told me that his sweet, beautiful Fen, his flower of the fields, had been kidnapped by another group of bandits and urged me to save her. I immediately assumed he was talking about his wife, so I rushed to her location and finished off the bandits. And then I found out who Fen actually is.
No, but she is here. Oh yes, just over here. Let me present her to you. Fen, come!
Fen, my flower! You are safe.
Yeah, I fucking lost it, man.
Do I have to slaughter that thing for you to show me some attention?
No, dear.
Are you lying again?
No, dear.
Are you listening to me?
No, dear.
Jade Empire even has a non-quest. One dude from Tien's Landing outright refuses to give you a quest, no matter how hard you insist. He's like, yeah, well, you know, I've been losing a lot of business because people can't afford to pay their debts back to me. And I'm like, hey, I can lend you some silver. And he's like, yeah, thanks, but I can't allow you to risk losing your investment. And then I was like, well, maybe I can help you collect the money. And he's like, nah, I don't want to cause any ruckus. I'm sure they'll pay me back eventually. Also, I'm not a very good businessman. Wow, this was something. Some quests even lead to interesting encounters that overshadow the quest itself. Later in the story I met this celestial bureaucrat. He is Zenbu, the magic abacus. He was assigned to
record, tabulate, and itemize the destruction that you cause.
I was expecting him to dump a truckload of lore in my lap, but no, he just started complaining about the amount of paperwork he had to do since I embarked on my quest. That I caused so much chaos that he was demoted because he just couldn't keep up with my exploits. Apart from the fact that I like this idea of a celestial bureaucracy keeping tabs on the mortal world in an office-like setting, I was struck by how fucking relatable this encounter felt. I'm sure we've all had that one mindless, thankless job. Imagine cooking up this dope-ass celestial Excel formula only for it to be rendered obsolete by some guy who had embarked in a once-in-a-millennia adventure. That must suck. I feel for my boy Zen. Now would be a perfect time to talk about the characters for a bit. They're a joy to talk to. I'm not talking only about the companions, the majority of NPCs are surprisingly fleshed out. You got Minister Shang, a craven and Weasley local official who cares more about his political career than his subjects, an overly verbose and arrogant traveler who sounds like he was ripped straight out of r/Nice Guys, a fight promoter who machine guns one malapropism after another with the same enthusiasm as little Carmine from The Sopranos, a gang leader who wants to settle down and asks you to find her a suitable husband, and so many more. Now I'm not gonna talk too much about the companions because this is a story-driven RPG and I don't want to spoil anything. What I will say though is that all of them are infused with that good old BioWare edge. I also like how they'll occasionally bicker over trivial shit. It really sells this idea of a ragtag group of adventurers with different personalities and ideals, and not of a subservient hive mind whose sole purpose is to cater to your every need. One thing that bugged me though is that Jade Empire does that thing where you have to ask your companions how they're feeling or what's their opinion on the current situation to trigger personal conversations. It made me feel more like an HR manager than, you know, just a member of the group. So overall, BioWare did a great job with its side content and characters. The writing can be a little verbose at times and conversations can drag on, but I have to say this is Jade Empire's strongest feature.
And so, the serpent gives you a real spectacle. Have your silver handy to place your wagers. I give you evil and terror incarnate.
Now, the reason why I left the combat for last is because I don't really have too much to say about it. It's Jade Empire's weakest part. Unlike KOTOR, Jade Empire's combat takes place in real time. The game offers a wide assortment of fighting styles. Some are hand-to-hand, while others require a weapon. Attacks are divided into normal and heavy attacks. Heavy attacks deal more damage but take some time to be charged up and are also useful for breaking through enemy guards. What's interesting here is that enemies are immune to certain styles. For example, ghosts are immune to weapons and the only way to destroy them is through hand-to-hand combat. Demons are immune to magic but weak to weapons, so some encounters require a bit of strategic thinking, especially since some techniques like spells and weapons consume mana and focus respectively. My favorite abilities are the ones that allow you to transform into demonic creatures. I gotta say, killing waves of assassins as a giant demonic toad is never not fun. Also, one of your companions can teach you the Drunken Master technique, which is pretty cool to be honest. And that's as deep as the combat gets, sadly. No matter what style or technique you choose, pretty much every fight plays out in the same way. Also, it's one of those games where you can just pick 2 or 3 abilities and stick with them for the rest of the campaign. Remember when I said that certain styles consume resources? Well, that issue is relevant only in the early game. I liked sword fighting, so I just dumped a truckload of points into focus and I never had to worry about it ever again. It got to a point where all I had to do was spam normal attacks until the fight was over, usually in less than a minute. It was so easy finding a set of abilities suited to every situation that I found no reason to experiment with other styles and techniques. So the combat is very forgettable and repetitive. I honestly think it almost ruins Jade Empire. It has some advanced vase smashing mechanics though. The sad part about all of this is that Jade Empire actually provides quite a few different choices that directly affect various story outcomes in small ways, which lends a bit of replayability to the game. But oh man, the combat is so boring that it could prevent players from revisiting the game to see how the different story choices play out. So that's my take on Jade Empire. Man, I don't know if I can recommend this game without a few caveats. The story, characters and writing are BioWare at its peak, but the shallow and repetitive combat as well as the bare bones RPG mechanics bring it down. So, I don't know. I'd love to say that the characters, writing and the setting make up for its gameplay hiccups, but I can't. Jade Empire just didn't click with me, at least not completely. I can see why Jade Empire has gained such a strong cult following though, because it is certainly a unique game. BioWare poured a lot of love into it. It plays and feels like a passion project, but that's not always a good thing. I believe that with a few more months of development it could have turned out differently. But as it stands, it's an interesting and flawed experiment that while I don't regret playing, I don't think I'll revisit. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.